And hello, everyone. Welcome to 15 Minutes. I'm Andrew Huff. My guest today is the representative for King County Council District Number 8, which incorporates White Center, West Seattle, and Vashon Island. He holds a master's degree from the University of Washington Evans School of Government. My guest, King County Councilman Joe McDermott. Councilman, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Andrew. Good to be here.
You have served in both the House and the Senate and also as a government analyst. So you've been involved as an elected official, but also as staff on the government level. Tell me, how did you first become interested in government and politics?
You know, when I was in high school, people were asking you what you're going to do when you grow up. And I really thought I was going to major in engineering and be a civil engineer, design bridges, solve problems. I was good in math. And then May of my senior year in high school, I went to Washington, D.C. for the first time on a school program, the Close-Up program, and you see government up close. You do more than just visit the monuments, but have conversations. One night there was a debate between a liberal and a conservative, so we'd hear both perspectives. Members of the media came in and spoke to us. Then Secretary of Education William Bennett spoke to the group I was part of, our then U.S. Senator Slade Gordon, and I came home knowing that I wanted to go into a career in public service instead.
What is it about public service that really inspired you to become involved?
I think it's really the notion that in the public sector, I believed you could have a more positive effect for more people than you could in the private sector. You know, Paul Wellstone said it well when he said, more people are doing better when more people are doing better.
Well said. You grew up in West Seattle. Probably spent lots of time at Seattle Center and on the beaches of West Seattle growing up. Who did you admire the most locally? What local politician did you admire the most growing up?
Well, I think several people, but one interaction that really had a lasting impact on me was in 1987. I was home from college and there was a knock on the door at my folks' house, and it was a candidate campaigning for King County Council. It was Greg Nichols, campaigning for what turned out to be his first successful election, and had a conversation with him at the door, and then ended up volunteering in his campaign and interned for him actually the first summer he was on the county council, and now hold the job he held at that time.
That's correct. You're now in his seat. Councilman, you, as I mentioned, you've served at various levels of government. You obviously know the important role that government plays as it interacts with the business community, with nonprofits, with higher education. That relationship that government has with various entities continues to be very important, I would imagine. You would agree?
Oh, very much so, yes.
And how, as an elected official, how have you worked to make that relationship more effective with other entities that you regularly work with?
I think it's really a matter of being in touch with your constituents and as many facets of them as you possibly can. From membership in the West Seattle Chamber of Commerce to the Greater Seattle Business Association, the Gay Chamber, to environmental groups and smaller constituent groups throughout the district.
Does funding for various services that your constituents request, is that continue to be one of the biggest challenges in government today?
Oh, very much so. Many of the requests that constituents come to me about are both about public safety, the number of sheriffs patrolling and protecting unincorporated King County, that includes White Center and Vashon in my district, and support for social services. And given the budget deficit that the county has faced year to year for more than a decade now, the amount of spending from the general fund in social services has declined dramatically. And so there's a real pent-up demand.
You currently chair the Budget and Fiscal Management Committee on the King County Council. You led a transition to biennial budgeting. Why is that important?
I think for two reasons. First of all, it gives us a longer view of the budget rather than a one-year snapshot, but a little bit more longer forecast and vision for what we're going to be doing. And also it gives the council additional time in the off year, the year we otherwise would have been doing the budget, to dive into some deeper issues and take a look at those.
What are some of those issues that you...
Right now, as we're taping, it's the first time that we otherwise would have been in the middle of an annual budget cycle that we don't have that body of work before us. So the council is looking at a number of things, from the stability of our budget and our revenue sources over time, labor policies, and financial issues within the public health department. So various committees and groups of council members are having an opportunity to dive into each one of those areas.
Councilman, I've talked to judges, prosecuting attorneys, caseworkers, and they all say that we must continue to take steps to reduce the number of young people that enter the juvenile justice system. Those numbers are currently down. What do you think are the most important steps that you could take to continue that downward trend of young people entering the juvenile justice system?
I think we need to look at racial disproportionality and recognize how disproportional the racial makeup of people in the justice system, both juveniles and overall, are, but also what kind of opportunities people have. And 3/4 of our county's general fund is devoted to public safety in some facet. A significant amount of that criminal
Includes
issues.
law enforcement.
Law enforcement, the jail, the courts, the prosecutor, the public defender, so the sheriff's office. So a broad definition of public safety, 3/4 of our general fund. And many of those contacts are once somebody's involved in the criminal justice system, a little late. Same thing with mental health and substance abuse and alcohol dependency. If we can try to get ahead of some of those issues, I think that's where the real benefit comes.
You know, as you know, about 20 years ago, the legislature passed a number of pieces of legislation that really took a tough approach on penalties for offenders, both adult and juvenile offenders. I think we're now seeing a lot of those effects of that of those pieces of legislation, and a lot of it's not real positive. Do you agree that maybe some of those laws that we passed a number of years ago that were meant to get tough on offenders are now sort of having a negative effect on us today?
I really do. I think it drives the number of people we see in our county jail and in state prisons in general, and ways that the legislature and the county can address that are with diversion programs like drug court. If somebody has a possession charge, the drug court is an opportunity for them to engage in treatment, an active treatment program, and eventually have those charges, if they're successful in the program, be dismissed and no longer be on the record.
Recently, local officials essentially declared an emergency in terms of homelessness, our homelessness problem in the area. You have said that we are in a crisis of homelessness and immediate action is required. What action can we expect from the county council in terms of eradicating our problems with homelessness?
Within a week of the mayor and the county executive making that declaration, the full council had adopted a motion seeking to expand the number of emergency shelter beds during the winter. The county has traditionally had a winter shelter in downtown Seattle in the county administration building, and the base number is 50 beds per night. We're looking at doubling or even tripling that in the very short term to provide more shelter beds, but also realizing that to be successful in addressing homelessness, it isn't just about shelter, it's about the long-term support. In fact, getting people into rapid rehousing rather than requiring them to be in shelter or transitional housing first. But getting them straight into housing proves more effective and more cost effective.
Now, devil's advocate here. About 10 to 12 years ago, there was an effort by local officials to entirely wipe out our homelessness problem. Yet we find ourselves today declaring an emergency in terms of the homelessness levels. What are we going to do different than maybe we did a number of years ago to resolve this issue that we have?
There was a plan 10 years ago to end homelessness within 10 years. And that plan has delivered a lot. But when we took on that audacious goal, it also wasn't with the expectation we'd have the Great Recession, greatest recession since the Great Depression, facing us both as a government and our ability to respond, and in how it affected people who were already on the margin trying to make it. So some unprecedented instances happened during that decade, but we had some extraordinary learning, like the idea of rapid rehousing, recognizing that shelter work and transitional housing isn't going to be the most effective way, but actually get people into solid housing immediately.
So it sounds like it's more than just simply pouring money into various programs, but maybe working better with other partners in resolving this problem.
Very much so, and making sure that we have strong performance measures, proven practices, or if there are particular communities that we haven't been successful with, identifying promising practices.
Councilman, you've been heavily involved with a piece of legislation called Best Starts for Kids Levy. You have called that legislation one of the most progressive pieces of legislation that you have been involved in. First of all, tell me what that legislation is, and tell me why you are so excited about the advance of this legislation.
Best Starts for Kids is a levy that the voters approved in November that makes strategic investments early in people's lives. Half of the funds are devoted to children under 4 and pregnant women. Things like prenatal care, nurse-family partnership visits to their home. It really makes sure that people have early support so they can reach their full potential. And it's about people meeting their potential that is the most inspiring part of the work. But it also gets to what I was talking about some of our poorly spent money in our budget, getting to things too late. Right. The criminal justice system, substance abuse, alcoholism, and many of those issues we can try to address so much earlier. And that's why I would say that Best Starts for Kids is the most progressive piece of legislation I've worked on, because it starts early and makes those early interventions.
Identifying some of the issues early on before they progress.
Exactly.
You, a bit on a personal level, many people don't know this, but you led the underground tours for a number of years. How did you become involved in that?
I was working as I was a member of the legislature and laid off from my previous employment and was looking for work that would be fun, use my history degree, and work around the legislative schedule. So indeed, I spent 7 summers as a legislator working as a tour guide in Pioneer Square. Enjoyed it very much.
What was the reaction to most people who went on that underground tour? I've been on it once a number of years ago and it was fantastic. But what's the reaction that you find with people?
Over 90% of the people are from out of town visiting. Most of the people like you who live in Seattle and come on the tour have been dragged by visitors from out of town.
Or your parents.
Exactly.
When you're younger.
And, I think real surprise about how the streets were raised in Pioneer Square, how we really changed the topography.
Councilman, you are the first openly gay member of the King County Council. Many people point to you as a role model in your respected profession. As a role model, do you believe that you provided a significant amount of influence to the council on issues impacting gay, lesbian, and transgender community?
I really do, and some days that can be easy to forget, and then you have somebody stop you and talk to you about how inspiring just even seeing an openly gay member of a legislative body is. So those reminders are really valuable to me, but the legislation, the work I've been able to lead the council on is for the first time recognizing and proclaiming Gay Pride Month throughout King County as a council action, supporting marriage equality as part of our state legislative agenda, and funding for youth and young adult homelessness issues, because estimates are that up to 40% of homeless youth and young adults are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgendered.
You came out when you were, I think, age 30. You were a bit apprehensive when you told your parents, but you really had, as you said, no reason to be apprehensive. What was it like for you to tell your parents at age 30 that you are gay?
I knew that my parents loved me unconditionally. I'd had that modeled for me. Any fear that I had that there might be a big issue, I could identify as an irrational fear, but yeah, it crossed my mind. It was something I thought about. But to be true to myself, to be intimate with my family, share who I am, was the bigger value. And it was a rewarding experience and gives me a truer, more authentic experience as a legislator as well.
Very good. King County Councilmember Joe McDermott. Councilmember McDermott, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Andrew.
And thank you for joining us, everyone. We'll hope you join us again for another 15 minutes. We'll see you soon.